As soon as I heard it, and I knew I was in trouble.
I've spent 20 years or so plus now working with them, and from my interactions with them, I've never been injured, I've never been threatened.
The bears pulled this hive off, and she's dragged off all these frames. They're a nuisance. I'm not fond of bears.
I think the more you know about a species, the less likely you are to be worried about negative aspects as much as more being just excited about knowing something about this incredible beast.
Hello, I'm Tom Murphy. Welcome to Land and Sea. The woods in the Maritimes are full of black bears, and we're starting to come in contact with them more often. Sometimes it's an awe-inspiring experience. Sometimes it's frightening. Now, the most definitive count to date of the bear population is underway in Nova Scotia. It promises to help us understand how to better coexist with these captivating creatures. There's an abundance of black bears on Canada's east coast. They're the big, quiet mammals we tend to take for granted. Slowly prowling through the wilderness, they weigh up to 500 pounds. They can live up to 25 years. Black bears have never made their way to Prince Edward Island, but in New Brunswick there are an estimated 17,000. That's more than one for every 50 people. There are plenty in Nova Scotia, too. Just how many? Biologists are about to find out. Deep in the Nova Scotia woods, a hunt is underway. A hunt for data on the province's largely invisible bear population.
I'm just going to break the branches off here. And then
25-year-old Brittni Scott is setting up a barbed wire enclosure under the supervision of a biology professor from Acadia University, Soren Bondrup Nielsen.
That one's alive. Yeah, on this side is a little bit more. Let's just wrap it around here.
Scott will set up 26 of these so-called bait stations in the Annapolis Valley. They're designed to snag material for DNA testing.
We set these up about 40 to 50 centimeters above ground. And so a bear, when it comes across, has to either go over it or under it. And in so doing, it leaves a little hair sample on one of these barbs for us.
Genetic testing can reveal the gender and movement of individual bears, as well as their relationship to other bears in the area. It will be added to information provided by hunters to give us the clearest picture yet of the province's resident bears.
And it's much less invasive than previous methods used. Like they used to have to bait bears and tranquilize bears and then put radio collars on bears and then have a guy wandering around the woods like trying to get a signal. Here, a little bit more.
Bears are lured by the scent of banana and fennel oil, which smells like licorice. It's an enticing recipe for mammals with a sweet tooth. Scott hopes to collect samples from these sites every 2 weeks.
All of our sites we have on this GPS. And so when we drive around, we can always find it exactly and like to the T where we set up our site when we're walking through the woods.
And we map them out using those GPS locations.
One of the goals of the study is to determine how far Nova Scotia bears roam, information that could result in fewer conflicts between bears and people.
I'll start this way.
It's a dream assignment for this budding biologist.
I'm excited to do a project that hopefully helps mitigate human-bear conflicts because there has been a few in Nova Scotia recently, just like property damage and stuff like that. And so it's about understanding bears and about understanding how we can live with bears.
The duo examines an existing site. They make an encouraging discovery.
There's some hairs here, Soren.
You got some?
Well, there's two. Is that bear?
Well, it's not a lot of hair, but sometimes that's all in here.
Yeah, it's certainly black, so there you got it. Any roots on it?
This one might have a root.
Yeah.
Right there, yeah.
Yeah. So
This is a 2-year project. Much of the work lies ahead in the lab, where Scott will analyze the data she's collected in the field. Bears thrive in the wilderness, away from people. there's a lot scientists have yet to discover about them. But in northern New Brunswick, an extraordinary man has contact with wild bears every day. He's Richard Goguen, who some people call the Bear Whisperer.
You know what's nice about you? You don't touch me. Okay, you already had your hand full. I understand that now. Okay.
Goguen has been feeding bears near Acadiaville in rural New Brunswick for almost 20 years.
On the ground. I know what it is. You go up. That's a good girl. That's a good girl.
Goguen attracts local bears to his property with grains and butcher shop leftovers. He relies on his special connection with bears to supplement his income as a school bus driver. Tourists, mostly from Europe, pay to watch. Feeding bears is generally discouraged by the government.
They don't depend on the food I give them, because I saw many times bear coming and lay down the other side there, put food, other bear come and clean. Well, I saw mothers and cubs way up in the trees. They don't come out down for the food. Other bear clean everything. So they don't depend on what I give them. It's only a treat to attract them so people can take pictures.
Goguen has become an unofficial expert in bear behavior. He even has names for some of them.
This evening we saw Matilda, Munchel and Holly, little teenagers, and Lola and Lenny. It's a mating season, and Shallow, the big guy, knows when those females are ready to be ready to have babies for next year. She's not yet quite ready, but he's going to follow her maybe for a few days.
You could say Goguen speaks their language, especially that of the mama bears.
When she's walking, let's say they're in the trees, she's walking toward the tree, she does this sound like she's telling them, it's me, it's mama. And when she wants them to come down, it goes like, and they rush down. This is mine.
If a teen gets out of line, Goguen can be a bit of a papa bear.
We don't touch the container. I'm not afraid because I cannot be afraid. You know, imagine being here, you're getting close to a bear, should I get close or not? No, I'm doing my thing and everything worked good. Then, just to tell you that if ever something like a bear would hurt me, they know it's going to be over. So between them, they protect me. You know, they know, they're smart.
Goguen insists bears are intelligent and peaceful by nature. No one in Atlantic Canada has ever been killed by one. Injuries are rare, but they are on the increase. Biologists say conflicts are more likely as we move into bear territory.
Attractants, if I could put it that way, things in around your house or your yard that would attract bears, then you're going to be in direct conflict. It could be the crabapple tree in your backyard. When the apples are ripe, it could bring in that bear, which makes the chance of an encounter that much more. They're likely going to be there at night when you're not, but there are times when they will cross paths, and that's what you want to avoid.
Coming up on Land and Sea, the unexpected consequences when bears and humans collide.
And if you don't understand what that behavior is, of why they're doing that, it can very much be perceived as a very threatening or an aggressive type of behavior.
Black bears are powerful creatures. When they're provoked, they often charge. Remarkably, this Canadian hunter survived with only a bruised elbow after punching the bear. Last fall, a New Brunswick man was seriously injured when he came between a mother and her cub. Mike Roy has also had some close calls, more than half a dozen. He operates a large outfitting company near Bathurst, New Brunswick. Hunters, almost all of them from the United States, come to take part in the province's spring and fall hunts. Roy lugs bread, grease, and popcorn into the woods as bait. It's dangerous work.
The most frightening thing is that one night, one of my hunters had harvested a bear, and we were going in to get it. And I was the one in front. My guide was behind me, and the hunter was behind him, and the hunter's son was behind him. And we were walking in, and it was a small little trail. We couldn't see very well. And the bear come around the corner charging at us. And I was carrying a gurney because we carry gurneys to take bears out. My guide in the back just had time to take out the spray and spray the bear, but the wind was wrong and came on us instead of the bear. We were choking, but in all the yelling and everything, the bear just went away. We were lucky that night.
It's not just hunters and outfitters who are potentially at risk. There are hundreds of complaints a year from people who see black bears even in urban areas like Halifax. More than 20 so-called nuisance bears are either moved or shot by wildlife officers every year. Many bears are also killed accidentally, leaving behind vulnerable orphans. These 4-month-old cubs are part of this year's collateral damage.
Well, we usually get cubs from all around the province, like every year. And obviously during the spring and summer, that's when we're going to get the most calls.
Pam Novak is the Director of Wildlife Care at the Atlantic Rehabilitation Center. She replaces mother bear's milk with puppy formula. A converted storage container serves as a makeshift den. Each cub has its own sad story.
One was a result, unfortunately, from the spring bear hunt, where the mother was unfortunately taken, and then they realized afterwards that she was a nursing sow. And there was another one because the mother was hit on the road, and the cub was found afterwards in the ditch trying to just locate where his mother had gone. And I think the third one was just because it was perceived that the mother was potentially a nuisance in a campground. She was removed not knowing that there was cubs, and then all of a sudden you find one.
These cubs will be in her care for a year and a half. Eventually they'll be transported back to where they were born. In the meantime, Novak keeps her distance.
These animals came in because they lost their mother, so it's a very traumatic and stressful situation that they're in. And for us to receive them, it's because the goal is to put them back out in the wild as healthy but wild animals.
Novak says the public's fear of bears is often rooted in ignorance.
I've spent 20 years or so plus now working with them, and from my interactions with them, I've never been injured. I've never been threatened. And to learn their behavior, because they're very, very vocal. They're very animated when they want to be. They're very almost dramatic in certain respects. And if you don't understand what that behavior is, of why they're doing that, it can very much be perceived as a very threatening or an aggressive type of behavior. And it's not.
Coming up on Land and Sea, using forensic science to uncover the secrets of Nova Scotia's bear population.
This is really exciting because this is actually samples from the site. So that means we know there's at least one male and one female around.
Black bears are a common hazard for hunters and outfitters. They're also a perennial problem for blueberry farmers and beekeepers. Lorraine Hamilton manages a team of beekeepers in the Annapolis Valley. They're not just any bees, they're the bees Oxford Frozen Foods relies on to pollinate its fields. It's the largest wild blueberry producer in the world. Beekeepers spend thousands of dollars on electric fencing to keep out marauding bears. Sometimes 5,000 volts of electricity is still not enough.
This spot right here, we know the bear's gone through there because there's hair on the fence right there. This is where the bear's pulled this hive off, and she's dragged off all these frames. This one here, it's hot, so a lot of the wax is melted, but she's basically eaten the inside of that. This one, you can see here, This dark part here is actually baby bees that are dead now. And that's basically what the bear is going for, is that protein. Okay, they're not Winnie the Pooh, they're not really going for honey. So it's an economic loss that I don't have that hive to pollinate the crop next year. I don't have the bees, and I don't have that comb's gonna have to get tossed.
In the spring, mother bears emerge from their dens thin and hungry. They often have to put on 60 pounds just to get through the next winter. Blueberry fields are hard to resist. So is garbage. This bear was caught on security camera ambling through a gas station parking lot looking for a snack. We may be seeing more black bears, but most of what we know about them is gleaned from hunters.
A requirement to hunting bear and the management of bear in Nova Scotia, we require all hunters to turn in a tooth so that it can be aged. And one of the teeth that we're looking for is not the large canine, but the premolar that's right behind it. And from that tooth, we can get an age of the bear, because we know when part of turning the tooth in, there's a mandatory report card. So we know when you got it, how you got it, where you got it, and then we can tell how old it was when it was harvested.
Meanwhile, back at Acadia University, scientists are gathering data that could help diminish the toll taken by human-bear conflicts. Brittni Scott is testing hair samples from the bait stations she set up over the summer. It's meticulous work.
These are all guard hairs, so the hair's on the top. And we're going to be looking for little hair follicles at either side of these hairs, which are hard to come by. The follicles are what contain the DNA. Oh, there's some. But it's just like a very small little white tip.
Scott will use the same forensic methods used to decipher human DNA. Often it happens that all the samples gathered end up being from the same bear. Not this time.
And so this is really exciting because the primer we're using, so this one's a female, this one's a male, and this one's a female. With 2 bands, that is a male, and with 1 band, that's a female, which is exciting because this is actually samples from the site. So that means we know there's at least 1 male and 1 female around.
Bears behave differently depending on their location. Typically, males roam over an area of 4 square kilometers. Early indications are that Nova Scotia bears don't have as much wanderlust.
My sense is that in the summertime, the bears are not moving over very large areas. However, later on, they start moving quite a bit. And often bears will go to specific areas that they're familiar with, like a favorite blueberry patch. And of course, nowadays, a favorite blueberry patch is going to be some farmer's blueberry field. And that's when problems can arise. So for blueberry growers and beekeepers, ultimately I think it'll come down to whether it's a single individual or multiple individuals. And that's going to take some time to figure that out.
Calculating the size of the province's bear population will require some complex mathematics. At this point, Bondrup Nielsen can only make an educated guess.
People are always surprised when I say there's probably about 10,000 bears in Nova Scotia, and they are kind of that many.
Eventually, the Nova Scotia study will provide a better understanding of how much land and what kind of habitat bears need.
So if it's a single individual that really causes havoc, maybe DNR will, come and destroy that bear. Where if it's just lots of individuals coming, then destroying them isn't going to help much because they're just going to keep coming.
After all the data is analyzed, it could very well prevent unnecessary removal of bears in the country and the city. Up to a third of the complaints in Nova Scotia are about bears getting into compost bins.
When it comes into a neighborhood and it starts hitting compost bins, and when they get to the point when they're laying on the lawn and they don't care what is around them, they become very comfortable. And those cases, you have to remove the bears.
The meat from bears that have to be killed goes to the province's food banks. Still, Boudreau feels the onus is on the public to avoid drawing bears out of the woods.
The nuisance ones, I really have a hard time, and this would be for any nuisance animal, removing animals that aren't really a problem. That could be a raccoon, for instance, in your garbage. If the raccoon is getting in the garbage, removing the raccoon isn't solving the problem. It's a garbage problem.
The way wildlife specialists like Pam Novak see it, bears are not intruders. After all, we live in bear country.
And we can minimize these kind of scenarios from happening if you just create that awareness going, you have to learn how to coexist and know that where we are in our environment, we're also sharing that environment with other animals. And bears, because of their size and the fact that they get this rap that they're these big ferocious predators, they are the ones who get the raw end of the deal, where they have to be removed and what's called dispatched, from their environment because of the fact that there's this fear factor, and the fear comes from not being aware or educated in terms of what a bear does in their behavior.
As scientific knowledge grows about the lives of maritime bears, the expectation is that they'll no longer have to pay the ultimate price for simply sharing the land with us.
You can live with them without having to remove them just because they're there. They deserve a living like every other wild creature out there.